What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devil Royale YouTube channel. Today, we're switching gears. We're going into a redraft mock draft. We haven't done one of these on this channel in some time. I know Kevin has done that in the past, but we did a dueling mock. Me from the 101 and Randy from the 111. Randy, hit us with some settings here. We were PPR, correct?
Yeah, PPR. Most of the time we play PPR, but it was um, one quarterback league, two running back, three receiver, tight end, two flex starts. Then we just did what is it, seven bench spots. Didn't put kickers or defenses in because who cares really? You're changing them every other week. It feels like so.
Yep.
We wanted some basic settings here. I feel like three wide receiver sets are becoming a little bit more like in the now. So let's do that for this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just get right into it. I had the first pick, and I picked Christian McCaffrey, and I think you can debate this at this point, just with concern over Christian McCaffrey's injury this preseason and his injury history over past years. But when you look at what he did last year, he's still the clear 101, especially when you start to talk about some of these running backs. There are some valuable running backs in the mid rounds, but I do think that there's a tier break from Christian McCaffrey, even to Bijan Robinson and Brees Hall, who I have ranked pretty highly. So I went there first. After me, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brees Hall, Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and then Randy was up. And Randy, who'd you take?
I went with Garrett Wilson here. He should be easily a wide receiver one this year. Depending on how much they want to use him in this offense, how much they're mixing in other receivers. With Rodgers back, Wilson should be an absolute stud. He's did it with much worse quarterbacks, and we thought we were getting the top end wide receiver one last year before the injury to Rodgers. I'm expecting us to have that same hype going into this year and get that result.
Yeah. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. rounded out that first round. So when you're looking at like value of picks, there's been a lot of discourse on social media lately about where the cutoff is. But I mean, if you can get Bijan Robinson at the 108, you can get, a potential wide receiver ones at the 110, 111, and 112. I'm pretty comfortable in every draft slot this year. I actually would argue that I'm less comfortable in the first overall spot. So that's why I went with that as we go through this mock. Over to round two, Jonathan Taylor came off the board with Marvin Harrison Jr. on that turn, and then Randy was up at the 2-2.
Yep, and I followed it up with Jahmyr Gibbs. Sorry, I looked at your pick and I was like, wait a minute, that's not what I did. So just another high upside guy from last year, someone that is also coming into the year a bit banged up, like your first overall pick in CMC. But worst case, I think they sit him a couple games just to be safe with him. But throughout the last stretch of the year, he showed truly his upside and his explosion. And that's with David Montgomery there. I think he's obviously still going to keep all of his workload for the most part, but Gibbs is gaining more and more trust. And with his coaching staff, that means more touches.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic double tap at the end of a round as well. If you go Wilson Gibbs, you're pretty solid to start. I'm not going to read off every single name throughout this draft, but I will for the first couple of rounds because there's a lot of good value here. Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, bit early for Derrick Henry, maybe. Chris Olave, Josh Allen, Devontae Adams, Travis Kelce, Drake London sniped from me one pick before. And I pivoted. I went to Nico Collins at the 212. I have Nico Collins projected as my wide receiver 7, averaging 18 points per game. A lot of people are scared off because of Stephon Diggs. I am not one of those people. I think Nico Collins is very clearly the best wide receiver in what should be a high-powered offense that scores a lot of points. Nico Collins should be the favorite to get, 10, 12 targets each week, despite having good weapons around him. So I went with that to kind of anchor my wide receiver room. But then I also double tapped wide receiver here. I went with DJ Moore. I think I could have gone in a few different ways. Brandon Ayuk's a really good pick here as well. But with DJ Moore getting Caleb Williams and this offense looking like it's going to throw quite a bit, I know Roma Dunze has had a good camp as well. But I still think DJ Moore is clearly the wide receiver 1 for the Bears this year. And I do think that the passing rate is going to go way up. We already saw what he could do with a lower passing rate last year and really throughout much of his career. So I'm pretty pretty much all in on DJ Moore. I have him down at wide receiver 11. So in my eyes, I got 2 wide receiver ones here. After that, Isaiah Pacheco, Brandon Ayuk, Patrick Mahomes, Devon Achane, Sam Laporta, Josh Jacobs, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, and then Randy was up at the 311.
Yeah, I double tapped running backs here in the second and third round with Rashad White, another guy that, last year obviously got an obscene workload and was not efficient with it. I think me and Christian both think the workload goes down slightly with more experience from the backups, and I had another possible backup in there. But hopefully with that, we get a little bit more consistency in there with a better offensive line. I think he's a talented back that's going to get at least probably 80% of his workload last year, if not more. With that, I'm happy to take him here at the back of the third, double tap running back, just because I'm definitely someone that always loves to go running backs, as Christian knows, and it works most of the time. But I also had a plan for the next couple rounds here. So I wanted to make sure I got a running back before the dead zone really hit for this year. So going him there is smart for me personally. Also, Sam Laporta at 3.6. I think he can hit that. I think that's his ceiling. I don't like to draft people at their ceilings.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then, we've got our first couple of quarterbacks in the last 2 rounds. I do think it's interesting that there's such a big discrepancy between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But also, I think there's a few other quarterbacks that you could mention in those veins. So, yeah, we're kind of doing an inverted strategy here, where I went running back first, wide receiver. You went wide receiver, running back, and then Jalen Waddle came off the board, and then DK Metcalf came off the board with him, and then you came back around with Cooper Kupp. Explain your pick, Randy.
Yeah, I think Cooper Kupp is a great value here in the fourth. A guy that's for some reason going like late fourth a few times. He was hurt last year. He was coming back from injuries. Yes, Puka Nacua was great, but Cooper Kupp was great first, and it's pretty much best friends with Matthew Stafford, it feels like, on the field at least. So I do expect him to have a big bounce back year. Not that Puka won't have a great year, but I think Cooper Kupp will end up being seen as at least a value in the fourth, if not an extreme value in the fourth.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. In this next group, we get 3 quarterbacks off the board, a couple of running backs, Trey McBride coming off the board, pretty much where I expect him to in most drafts. I've seen him there quite a bit. And then at the 412, I took George Pickens. My wide receiver is 16 as of right now, but a little bit higher in points per game. I think when you look at that Steelers offense and how targets are going to have to filter, unless they add Brandon Ayuk in the next few days, which I just don't anticipate happening at this point, then George Pickens should see a massive target share, a massive workload. And maybe that brings some of his efficiencies down a little bit, but I'm okay giving up some of his efficiency because his yards per catch clip last year was insane. So if it comes down a little bit, but he gets a little bit more volume, I do think that we're locking him in as a top 20 wide receiver. And so I got 3 top 16 wide receivers with my last 3 picks, and it was time to go back and get a running back. Alvin Kamara, 5-1. The Saints are going to probably be bad this year. We just talked about that over on the podcast. But I do think that just from a volume perspective, Alvin Kamara is going to work his way in, probably be a gross looking RB1 when it all is said and done. But I have him up there at my running back 8 slot. So if I can get my RB8 in the 5th round, I'm feeling pretty good about my build. And so right now I'm rocking with the veteran running backs in Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. After that, we saw another couple of tight ends come off the board. Anthony Richardson worked his way in, and actually 3 tight ends here in this group. 4 tight ends if you count the pick after you, but you went in a different direction here at the 511.
Yeah, I double took the running backs in the second and third because I really wanted to, with a 3 receiver set here, get my starting running backs and receivers done with. So I went with Keenan Allen here at the end of the 5th. Just another, for me, I think a guy that's going to have a really good year. We already knew how good he was and how unguardable he is, but it feels like a whole new team talking about it more, gets you a little bit more amped about it. So I do think this offense has a lot of weapons, and Caleb is going to make some mistakes. But I do think here in the fifth as my wide receiver 3, I'm really happy with Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Over to the sixth round, Aaron Jones came off the board, and then you double tapped the Detroit running backs.
Yeah, it's one of those where I questioned it very hard, but I really am not in love with James Conner, at least at that pick. I think at the back of the six, I'm happier to do it. I think the same with DeAndre Swift and Stevenson as well. Montgomery and Gibbs were so good last year. Montgomery getting the touchdowns mostly and getting some of the passing work, getting a lot on the ground. And again, this is a bit of an insurance for Gibbs, depending on how much he sits out, if any. But I think both of them, with Montgomery being a flex player, I'm very happy to have him there every week, no matter what. I'm perfectly fine to play them both every week.
Yeah, and that was a strategy that worked a lot last year, so I think that's a viable way to go about it. I do think this is the peak of the dead zone for running back. So if you don't get Montgomery, that's pretty much the last one I'm in on among this group. I mean, Swift is an okay pick, but there's just more value elsewhere. And with that being said, that's why I chose Jordan Love, and I chose to go a little bit early on my quarterback for my liking. I'm normally a late quarterback type of guy because there always tends to be some really good value out there. But if you have tuned into the channel, you know how high I am on Jordan Love this year. So it was really tough for me to pass him up. I've got him at my QB3 this year, so very much so above consensus. Getting him at this value was, it was a strategy that if I'm not taking a wide receiver there, then I didn't really like any of the other positions. I probably should have taken a tight end here with one of these two picks, as you'll see as we get through this draft. Instead, I took Terry McLaurin with my next pick. With the Jahan Dotson trade, not that I think that impacts much, just with all the camp buzz. I just don't even know if Jahan Dotson was getting on the field, but I think it just solidifies everyone's view that Terry McLaurin is going to be a target hog for Jaden Daniels. I think they have a pretty good connection already from everything that I've read. And so with a 3 wide receiver build, I wanted to get my first flex wide receiver or a guy that I can rotate into that starting wide receiver spot. And then just a slew of wide receivers come off the board, a few running backs mix in, and then you went and got the guy I knew you had to draft before the end of the draft. So I left him for you there.
That's fair. I did the same for you in the next round. So, yeah, honestly, though, I was really hoping one of Rashid Rice. I was kind of hoping, but I didn't think he'd get to me. But Raheem Mostert, Zamir White, or Najee Harris, I was going to be happy with taking here at the back of the seventh, getting a really balanced approach of 4 running backs, 4 receivers. Four running backs, 3 receivers. No one could go wide receiver later more. But instead, I want Deontay Johnson, obviously one of my favorite players, if you've listened for a while. And, going to a new system, everything, they're absolutely in love with him. They've made him their pinnacle piece of this offense, and he is going to capitalize. In the 7th round, getting somebody that's safe and consistent with PPR play is always nice. And now he's going to, I would say, a better quarterback situation than last year on a team that's truly valuing him and trying to get him the ball as much as possible. So I'm super happy to get Deontay Johnson at the end of the 7th.
Yeah, I think that's good value. I am a little lower on him just because I'm lower on the Panthers offense, but I also think he's going to give you 10 to 14 every week. And so, like you said, you're looking for consistency there. I think that's a good pick at the back of the 7th. Top of the 8th, Brock Purdy came off the board. Crazy pick right there. Didn't love it. And then you took the tight end that I was kind of targeting at this moment.
Yeah, I debated taking the tight end you would want or the running back you would want. And, with Brock Purdy coming off here in the 8-1, not that I was going to take him here, but I think that really, truly shows why I don't have a quarterback yet, because I feel like they're going too fast. So instead of jumping on the train, I'm going to take one of the best value tight ends of the draft this year, Jake Ferguson in the 8th round. It's going to be the second best weapon on the team going for the Cowboys. And right now he's the best option because CeeDee Lamb still hasn't reported. So I think this is one of my favorite tight end picks. I do think I'm all for taking them earlier. I do wish some of the guys were like a round later for value purposes, just so I had some ceiling to grow there. But I think there's a lot of growth possible here for Ferguson, and I knew you'd want him. Unfortunately, though, that means I couldn't get who you took in the eighth.
That's right, but also before we get there, my pivot points were David Njoku. Brock Bowers was kind of a pivot point. I'm a little bit lower on him compared to the guys that I ended up with, but David Njoku was like my okay, fine. Ferguson's gone. I'm gonna get Njoku. He comes off the board, the pick before me. I get sniped again by the CPU, and I take Jalen Warren, who once again, if you've listened to the channel at all over the last few weeks, I'm very, very high on Jalen Warren. It looks like it's going to be a 50-50 split between Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. But when you talk about what the valuable touches are going to look like, I think Warren's going to be a main factor in the running back receiving game. I do think that when you talk about Arthur Smith's ability to call an efficient run game, he's still got that. He's got a lot of flaws, but that is not one of them. I think Warren should get more efficient on the ground than he has been. And just on a per touch basis, I love what Warren can do. So I snagged him to be my like third running back in here. And then I snagged my fourth running back in Brian Robinson. It's funny because I was not high on those two guys for most of the last couple of years. And this year, I've kind of turned the corner a bit. Brian Robinson is getting rave reviews from the coaching staff in Washington. I do think that this offense is going to try to run the ball a little bit more than I think Jane Daniels fans will like. But he's also going to be a part of that running the ball. They still have Austin Eckler, so some of the passing work is not going to be there for Robinson. But he's one of those players you put in your lineup. You hope he scores a touchdown. And I think Washington might have a sneaky, decent offense this year. The more I've looked into it, so I took him here, and then another slew of running backs come off the board. Quarterback run here too, which I think hurts you a little bit. And then you chose to pivot to another running back.
Yeah, I personally was surprised you didn't go to one of those running backs in that run. I know we're both relatively high in Devin Singletary this year.
Mm-hmm.
I know how much we both like Jonathan Brooks coming into the year. There's injury concerns to where when he'll start, but you take the upside pick here if you need a running back. Not necessarily that you do, but I get why you went Robinson and then Tajay Spears. I know the hype is all around right now, so I
Mm-hmm.
just to see you pick Brian Robinson after all the words we've said
Oh, I know.
was
I know.
was like, oh, okay. And then I had just enough time to figure out that and digest it to see like all the quarterbacks I wanted in the ninth round gone. So that was not my favorite thing in the world. I really think Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, you can get one of them in the ninth round. That's an absolute steal for this season. You get to get all of your starters in place before then, and you throw your quarterback in, finish with some upside shots. So because of that, unfortunately, I took an upside shot here in the ninth round. I went with Trey Benson. Just again, upside shot. I know James Conner's a starting running back. I do think this is definitely a wait and see thing, second half of the year type of thing. It is a bit of a roster clogger, but him and Jonathan Brooks are high value roster cloggers where unless I'm absolutely screwed with injuries, I'm going to be happy to just let them sit on the bench. And if I'm really that part up in injuries, I probably lost anyways. So we'll
Yep.
figure it out.
Yeah. I love this pick. There aren't many running backs around this area that you have more upside. I went with the safe one. I think Brooks is another one with upside, Singletary as well. But yeah, Trey Benson is loaded with upside. Dallas Goedert, Jamison Williams come off the board, and then you take another running back loaded with upside here.
Yes, at least this is definitely okay. I took a guy for the back half of the year. Let me take a guy for the front half of the year and Jerome Ford here in the 10th round. Another guy I'm definitely targeting here in the 10th, just simply because even if it's only 8 weeks, 6 weeks where he's the starter, those are very high, very valuable games. I think he's going to do really well. We saw that last year, even with inefficiency at the quarterback position. So when that happens this year again, with the actual starter in there, we'll be fine. But I think he'll be able to help me, give me an option in the flex to win games this year.
Yeah, I have Jerome Ford as my RB21. I probably should have taken him over Brian Robinson. I probably should have taken a couple guys over Brian Robinson, but that's what happens in drafts. Sometimes you You make the wrong pick, or like
In,
a pick that doesn't align exactly with your rankings. It
yeah,
happens.
in fairness though, Brian Robinson's going to be the starter of the year. Jerome Ford is not.
That's yeah, exactly right. And that was part of the thinking. In this group, nothing really stands out except Zeke and Gus Edwards going a little high for my tastes. Personally, I think both are going to be in some type of timeshare. Uh, I don't think Zeke fans want to hear that, but I ended up with Romeo Dobbs, the wide receiver for Green Bay, where I just wanted a piece of the Green Bay offense. I wasn't sure. I obviously saw Christian Watson come off the board. I wouldn't have drafted him anyway. I wasn't sure if I could wait and maybe get the guys that I actually want later, and Dontavian Wicks specifically. And I missed out on him. So I'm glad I took Dobbs where I did. I just wanted one guy where if Love goes on a heater and Dobbs ends up being the wide receiver one, I can just have that stack in my lineup. So that's where I went here. And then I hit Khalil Shakir at the 11-1 because I just think he's incredibly undervalued and mispriced in drafts right now. I think people are going to panic because when Mac Hollins came back in that second preseason game, Khalil Shakir was only on the field for the 11 personnel snaps and 3 wide receiver sets. But I do think this team is going to run a good amount of 11 personnel. And I also think Khalil Shakir is probably going to start over Keon Coleman in 2 wide receiver sets. I think they're just getting Keon Coleman work. So I'm not panicking about Shakir. I think he's one of the better values in the entire draft. I have him down as my wide receiver 37, but like in the 11th round, I'll take that for sure. And then you finally took a quarterback in this round.
Yeah, you're not the only one that can stack your quarterback with wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 11th, I went with Aaron Rodgers. Again, yes, if this is Dynasty, I really don't want Aaron Rodgers for more than a year rental type of situation. But this is redraft. I'm happy to take the old guy that's going to sling it to my first round pick. And spoiler alert, my 12th round pick. So I went with the double stack with Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a good play this late. So yeah, I really didn't like any of the other values besides like I said, I was hoping to get Caleb Williams in the 9th to pair with Keenan Allen, but that couldn't happen. So I went with Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers through 12 rounds. And again, Mike Williams, when he's on the field and healthy, is phenomenal and can make
Mm-hmm.
ungodly plays and can have 30-point weeks easy. So I'm happy to take him here late. He's going to spend, let's say, 5 weeks on my IR spot, and I'll live with it. But hopefully I can get him in there once with the right week with Aaron Rodgers and win a week.
I don't even think it'll be 5 weeks. It seems like week 3 he'll be back at like probably not a full workload.
Yeah,
Uh,
I did mean when he'd actually be back.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was combining the whole season.
Fair, fair. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic on a points per game basis. I have Mike Williams ridiculously high. I think he's going to have a great year. I had to pivot to going a couple of late round tight ends. I started with Isaiah Likely, who I do have finishing as a top 12 tight end. Not that that matters a whole lot. I missed out on the elite ones, but as far as like just getting a guy I can plug into my lineup, I would rather do that with him, who has there's been some buzz that he is the actual wide receiver 2 on this team. He's going to line up in the slot a lot more. We've heard it before, so I'd love to see it. But that's why I end up double tapping tight end in a couple of rounds here. But when you miss out on the big tight ends, this is kind of what you got to do. You've got to take 1 or 2 late and hope that they hit, and hope that you have a gem late in your draft, or you're streaming, and that's okay. I did come back around here with Josh Downs. He's hurt at the moment, but when you talk about the Anthony Richardson discourse is insane to me because Josh Downs and him I wouldn't call Josh Downs his favorite target because Michael Pittman was clearly that, but having Josh Downs as your security blanket is very critical to Anthony Richardson's, play as a passer. And I think Downs is going to be a PPR monster this year. I think he's going to just catch a lot of balls. I don't necessarily know he's going to get in the end zone, but if he can get me like 8 for 64 or something like that, I'm good with that. And I think we could have quite a few weeks like that. So, and then because I did that, I missed out on Dontavian Wicks. We went in this round pretty close to you, and then you went with a rookie wide receiver.
Yeah, it would have been Dante Wicks. I can tell you that's who I was targeting here. But instead, I went with Ricky Pearsall in the 13th round. Simply, another rookie. I get it. This does seem a little rookie happy, at least in the later rounds, but I'm all right sticking with it simply because I'm happy to cut him. If
Hmm.
if Brandon Ayuk doesn't get traded, which I think at this point we're like a 70-30, he's on the 49ers. I think that's pretty fair. Just under three-quarters of the way there. So,
Hmm.
just because he simply, it seems at this point, doesn't want to be there. So that's why I'm still giving the decent chance to get traded. If he gets traded, Ricky Pearsall doesn't necessarily step into the starting lineup like the top two receivers, but he's going to get every chance to, and I think he's going to earn it with how he plays. Yes, he has some lingering issues coming into the year. They knew about that. They're figuring it out. I think he'll be fine. But either way, at least I take an upside shot here late that I'm happy to cut. I think that's always one of my biggest things is these last like 4 rounds, take guys that have a chance to show you early that just a glimpse of hope at least. And
Hmm.
then worst case, I cut them to waiver and get somebody that can actually help me. So Pearsall here, big upside, very small floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Antonio Gibson came off the board right before you went with another young wide receiver, but also another mispriced, undervalued wide receiver back here. Good pick right there.
Yes, this is the opposite of the rookie picks. This is a secondary player that is getting the lower price because of 2 rookie picks. Pop Douglas was by far the Patriots' best receiver last year, and I don't think that's changed. He is still very, very talented. He's explosive and he's consistent. He can play all over the field, and I think they will find a lot of uses for him while they figure out the rookies and what they're best at.
Yeah.
So I think there's every chance that Demario Douglas is the Patriots wide receiver one this year. Now, how valuable is that is a big question, but it's the 14th round. I don't care.
Yeah. I have him inside my top 36. So realistically, if I was just going straight from my rankings, I would have taken him 2 rounds earlier. So I think that's a great pick. Instead, because you're building a team and you're not building out rankings, I had to take a second tight end. I don't love doing this. I really don't like taking 2 tight ends and a single tight end. But Colby Parkinson looks like he's going to be a mainstay in this Rams offense. I know that they've got another rookie wide receiver that they seem to be infatuated with, but when you think about the Rams offense and when it was the best, Tyler Higbee was a big part of that. Higbee's not going to play a whole lot this year. He had that late season injury last year, and Parkinson was paid about the amount that Higbee got. So I think they view him as a similar type of player with a ton of upside, and he flashed that in Seattle. So I'm just going to hope that either Parkinson or Likely hits in week 1, and then I can choose which one I'm going to keep long term. And inevitably, I will choose wrong, cut the wrong one, and the other one will be a top 5 tight end when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I know you didn't have the option because he was gone, but I'm someone that inexplicably seems to always get Hunter Henry on my roster,
Hmm.
and he's always good.
Yeah,
He's
he
rarely
is.
great, but he's shown the greatness, and he can
Hmm.
get in the end zone more than the best of them, really. Would you have just? I feel like you still would
No.
have went Colby just because of how you're building your tight end room, but like
Yes.
I
There,
to me,
I'd
it's
rather
like
take upside than safety, I guess is my
yeah,
only argument, I
that was
guess there.
my. But it's a constant thing with you took upside already with likely,
Hmm.
so do you take the safety? I think
That's
most of
fair.
the time you should take the safety then the upside, so you
Right.
have that floor because you have a higher floor because you took them earlier. So it is backwards in that situation. So I definitely think you would have still went Parkinson, but there's there's going to be a draft, at least a mock draft I do, where I'm in the 14th, 13th round with no tight end. I'm like, I'll take Hunter Henry. Just
Sure. Yeah.
he's basically a streaming tight end every week. I know I'm going to get 7 to 15 points depending on the touchdown or not, and
Yeah.
not be super angry about it.
It's fair for sure. I mean, my thing was like as I was looking up and down my rankings, I'm like, man, there are a few like upside guys that I like. Tucker Craft is a guy that came to mind as well, where I'm like, I already have the Green Bay stack in that sense. I think Kraft is going to be their one. I know Musgrave already came off the board, and I'm not in on him, so that was where I was thinking too. But I went with Colby. I think Colby's going to be. I think he's going to be the best. I think he's actually a better pick than Isaiah Likely, and I haven't ranked a little lower, but I just think from a value perspective and a weekly startability, I think Parkinson might be the better pick. I came back around and I took Jordan Mason at the 15-1. And so when you look at my build right now, I started with Christian McCaffrey. I need insurance for that. I've seen the seasons without Christian McCaffrey. And honestly, if I miss out on the first overall pick, I'm probably not winning the league. But this is a time where a lot of folks argue that you shouldn't grab your own injury replacements to sit behind your guys. I don't think that's the case when you're insuring the first overall pick. So Jordan Mason looks like he's the number 2 out there. He looked really, really efficient when with the starters last week in the preseason. So I'm just on the hype train. I'm here. I am a big believer in Elijah Mitchell, but it seems like they also are big believers, but understand that he's just gonna inevitably get hurt. Mason is more sturdy and in the lineup more, so I took him here.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I do agree when you're the 101, I'm more inclined to take a handcuff super late like this. It's with the 49ers. There's probably no true handcuff, but from what we saw from Mason so far, it seems like he's got the best chance. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell has shown a lot too, who went right after, pretty
Yeah.
much. But he also has injury stuff. And again, Christian McCaffrey is getting into the year banged up. So taking his handcuff is even more valuable right now. And then I went with Luke McCaffrey, a different kind of handcuff for Christian. He's just taking his brother. But
Hmm.
again, a guy that has a chance to be the wide receiver too in Washington, I don't think it's going to happen. But I'd rather take a chance and just see right now. Just because I like what I saw on tape. And I think he landed in a good spot. If they do throw more than I think you're expecting, or really I'm expecting, then he has some chance to give me a safe play here, and at least I can see what he is. In all honesty, though, I was really hoping kind of Damian Pierce and Khalil Herbert got to me,
Hmm.
simply because I can cut them super quick. But man, if we get a week 1 or week 2 injury, those two
Mhm.
guys are heading somewhere. And
Yeah.
they're going to be, instead of trying to pick them up off the waiver wire, I have them. When it's
Yeah.
super early in the year, I'm okay doing something like that. Obviously, in week 7, I'm not going to be super happy about holding them on my team.
Yeah. I think that's fair. You did exactly that though with Tank Bigsby here at the 16 too, and I love this pick. I'm still in on Tank Bigsby. Sorry, folks. I'm in. He looks good this preseason. So, what are your thoughts on that pick?
He's shown more this preseason. I think is the biggest thing. I don't think he was necessarily ready last year. I think he might be ready this year to take at least a decent role in this offense. And I do think if ETN did get hurt, he would be the bell cow back. They would obviously use other backs, but I think he would get most of the work. Uh, Besides that, here, like I know we'll get to your pick, and I know why you picked him, but other running backs, like I don't want AJ Dillon should be cut. I don't want Justice Hill. Will Shipley, I love, but I know if I picked him, I wouldn't cut him, and that's the issue.
Mhm.
And probably same with Dylan Loud. So I was happy to take Tank.
Yeah, and I just with that running backs here, I just decided I'm gonna do the same thing, but at wide receiver. If we get a week 1 injury to Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan has a shot to be a mainstay in fantasy lineups. I think he's a really, really great value. He is the starter on the outside in 11 personnel. Obviously, it's Godwin and Evans when it's 2 wide receiver sets, but McMillan is that third guy that has been established throughout this training camp. So the last pick of the draft, I mean, shoot, what if he has a 100-yard game in his first game? Because that's how the Bucks offense tends to go sometimes. So, I took him here, and then just rounding out, I did this by round, but we can also read off our actual starting lineups. So my starting lineup: top to bottom. Jordan Love at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara at running back, Nico Collins, DJ Moore, George Pickens at my 3 wide receiver slots, Isaiah Likely. My 2 flexes by round would be Terry McLaurin and Jalen Warren. I might flip Khalil Shakir in there. Obviously, I would, if Christian McCaffrey doesn't play week 1, I'd throw Jordan Mason in there. But I'm feeling good about my starting lineup. I have a lot of upside on my bench, but once again, it's like, there's going to be some waiver ads. Hopefully you can hit on 3 to 4 of your bench players and then be comfortable, flipping some of those guys for waiver wire ads. Randy, read off your team.
Yeah, I got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs and Rashad White as my running backs, Garrett Wilson, Cooper Kupp, and Keenan Allen as my starting 3 wide receivers, Jake Ferguson at tight end, David Montgomery, and Deontay Johnson, as you said, by round as my starting flexes, with Trey Benson, Jerome Ford, Mike Williams, Ricky Pearsall, Demario Douglas as possible flexes early on with high upside, and then Luke McCaffrey take Bigsby just as shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, I really actually like both of our teams here. As I was going through it, there are a couple other teams that I'm like, yeah, I think they might win the league on us, but they're CPUs. They don't exist. We don't care about their teams. So that's where we landed. I think I like your team a little bit more, though. I feel good about my wide receiver situation in comparison to yours, and so that's my only thing. Is I have what I believe is the better Bears wide receiver, and that I think is the critical piece there. But I mean, from a running back perspective, I could have missed on both of my starting 2 running backs. If Kamara doesn't pan out because he wasn't efficient, and if Christian McCaffrey stays hurt, then I'd just be in trouble. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you invested slightly more early on in wide receiver and quarterback.
Yeah.
Again, you round 2 to 4, you took receiver. Round 2 to 4, I did not. I took 1. So there's a big change there, but I'm happy to get the vets as my wide receiver 2 and 3, and then take a safe guy and a couple upside picks. That's something I always would rather do. And again, if I can take Deontay Johnson back to the 7th for that workload, I'm happy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, let us know what you think. Do you like Randy's team better, my team better? Do you think this one of the CPU teams, if you were following along, do you think they were a little bit better? Let us know in the comments. And as always, as you could see on the screen here, we did use Sleeper for our mock draft, but we are also partners with Sleeper Picks, where they will match one of your deposits up to $100 if you use the code the Devi Royale. This is for first-time deposits only. It's only available in certain states, but if you don't know, it's a weekly pick'em. They have college football on there. They have NFL. They have every sport, and it's just you pick one or the other, and then you can win money. It's like a really fun way to do, sports things, gambling bets, all that stuff. Good picks. So make sure you check that out. Head to your Sleeper app and use the code the Devi Royale on your first deposit. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.